Welcome everybody to a new episode of the Orthodox Spirit. Today I am here with Archdeacon Mark from St. Paul American Coptic Orthodox Church. Thank you for doing this with me today. I know it's been a long time coming.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I'm a big fan of the podcast, so it's an honor to be here.
That means a lot. I usually start by just having the guests give a little bit of a background on themselves.
So I've been in Archie for 7.5 years, maybe 8 years now. I've been serving at St. Paul's American Coptic Church since it started in 2012. Now I do a lot of services outside in the diocese and different dioceses and things like that. And most recently, His Eminence Metropolitan Serapion asked me to lead the charge in this new Department of Church and Culture, and kind of focusing on sort of the return of being very Orthodox and very American, right. And kind of focusing on that. And so that's been a lot of work, that department.
Yeah, and something we spoke about just briefly off camera is the separation of like culture and religion, and how important is that for people to understand especially for people like that are new to the Orthodox religion?
Yeah, I mean, it's natural that the culture affect a religion in any country. Like, so Greek Orthodox churches are very Greek, very Ethiopian, very Russian. That's just normal. And we're very Egyptian, we're Coptic Orthodox, but clearly an Egyptian culture. So I think that's a normal part of it. And nothing to be upset about. Mm-hmm. It enhances the religion. It provides sort of a context for how we practice the religion, but it presents its own challenges, right? So you can imagine in the American culture, some things are very valued and some things aren't.
Right.
Transparency, honesty, integrity, that's very valued in American culture, whereas sexual promiscuity and stuff like that, less so. That's not a real big deal. In Egyptian culture, it's the opposite, mm-hmm. right? It's all about purity and, sexual purity and making sure, and that's like really important, and don't drink and don't dance and don't, do those things. Whereas other parts of the gospel can be neglected, right? So it's nice when we switch cultures, and because then it sort of brings to surface, well, what is actually Orthodoxy? What is actually Christianity? Right. What is important and what isn't? And we really are sitting in an experiment now that just doesn't happen in the world, which is, you take a church that's lived in a country for 2,000 years, and you just transplant it, and you just put it on another continent. Mm-hmm. And that's just never happened, in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And so all the churches that have moved to the United States are struggling to say, well, we've been in Syria for, whatever number of years, 2,000 years or whatever, and now we're here. And are we Syrian or are we American?
Right.
And I think that's a difficult transition to make. Yeah. But the church, by its nature, is missionary. It's by its nature, it's evangelical. That's what it is. And so as soon as it ceases to exist for the people outside of itself, well, then it's lost its purpose, its meaning, and so we have to always be missionary and evangelistic minded, and constantly never feel like, always feel like a stranger in whatever country we're in. Right. We should never make it like part of our identity so much in a church. I mean, I can say I'm an Egyptian and be proud of that, no problem. I can be an American, be proud of that, no problem. Canadian, no problem. But once we connect those two, now it's a little bit dangerous, and we've lost the focus on Christ.
Yeah. So do you think that cultural barrier or that cultural adjustment, I guess, so to say, is the reason why Christianity differs between here and places like Egypt and Syria and more traditional places?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you're going to find traditions and customs that make their way into the practice of Orthodoxy that are innocuous in that country. But then when you move them outside the country, someone may ask, well, where'd that come from?
Right.
And no one ever asks that when you're in Egypt, because everyone's like, oh yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense.
That's so true, yeah.
But then you move outside and now everyone's asking. And sometimes the answers, unfortunately, sometimes parents don't have the right answer, so they just make something up. Something doesn't hold water. And then the kid, is like, okay, and then he turns 24, 25, he's like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all. None of this makes any sense. So, and then they think the whole thing is bogus, right? This whole religion is bogus, when in fact all that happened was mom had to come up with some silly answer for something.
Right.
And that was bogus. But they'll throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? And so if we can educate parents and we can, educate people who are, teaching our kids, say, look, here, here's the depth, right? Here's what the fathers teach. And I think if we return to the depth, you'll find that the fathers are amazing. Yeah. And that's really where it's at. And sometimes our view of the fathers are these old fogies who are really harsh and really tough and really strict. I mean, some of the most inspirational, open-minded liberal quotes you'll find come from the fathers. Quotes on love and respect and mercy and compassion for your brother. It's amazing. More so than the stuff we hear now.
Right.
So if I think we go back to them, we go back to the words of Christ, we go back to the words of the apostle, we go back to the original stuff, and that will help us find our roots, and that's why our tagline is seek Christ, know Christ, be Christ. And it's a very focused tagline, and I think that's where it's at.
Why do you think the early church or the early church fathers' writings are so disregarded in Western Christianity?
Well, I think a big part of it is just the Protestant Reformation, right? The Protestant Revolution, where it was throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? It was, and the history is, well known, right? The Catholic Church sort of, leaned in a certain direction, very traditional, very clerical, not biblical, and the Martin Luther, rightfully so, revolted back and said, look, you guys aren't biblical anymore. Yeah. You're kind of making some stuff up right now. And he pushed back, and when you look at a lot of the stuff he said, he had a good point, but in a lot of people's opinions, he went too far.
Right.
And so once you cut that chain with the early church, the anchor, now you're going to float. And what you basically see is that, right, where the Protestant church, you had Martin Luther, had Lutheranism, and then you had, Zwingli, and you had John Calvin, and then, next thing you have, Presbyterians, and you have Methodists, and you have Baptists, and you have Southern Baptists, and then that they split and subdivide, and I have thousands of evangelical sects, each one disagreeing with the other person, right, and starting a church down the street. And so the nature of, and this is also cultural, right? The nature of Americans is, we don't like to be told what to do. We don't like to be told this is the way it is. Mm-hmm. We want our freedom to be respected. And so Americans created a religion that culturally was appropriate in that it gave flexibility and freedom, and hey, your truth isn't my truth. And but of course, Orthodoxy isn't like that.
Right.
And so of course, the truth doesn't change. How I live that truth and how I practice that truth, that's going to be culturally appropriate all the time and time sensitive. How someone in the 8th century lived Orthodoxy isn't going to be the same way I live in the United States in 2025. It's just not going to be. That's okay. So I shouldn't be imitating their, maybe their exact execution or some of the little things they did, but that spirit and the way they think about what the call of Christianity is extremely important. It's everything.
Yeah, and I tend to see even the responses I get online is a large group of the newer generation kind of pushing towards Orthodoxy or more traditional forms of Christianity. I believe, in my opinion, only because it is unchanged and it is something that won't change down the line. So like for instance, you mentioned all these other denominations, like they can all of a sudden start a new one, and because of something they didn't agree with. That doesn't happen with Orthodoxy. Do you think that in long term that people will gravitate more towards traditional Christianity than the new Reformed denominations?
I think people are going to go back and forth. I think there's a big movement I've heard in the last few months, last year, of especially men apparently coming to Orthodoxy because they like the structure and they like the rigidity of it, and they like that it's unchanging. And I've heard some quotes from Charlie Kirk, saying that exact same thing. And I think that's great, but you also want to make sure you come for the right reason. Every once in a while I'll meet a convert who's like, you know what, I just want to pray in Arabic and Coptic, and I just want it to be exotic, and I'm in it for the culture, and I'm in it for the uniqueness, and I'm in it for the diversity, and I'm like, are you in it for Christ at any point here? Because if you're just looking for something mysterious and unique, and I chant in a language no one else understands, and what are you doing this for, right? And sometimes we get real excited when a convert comes and we're like, okay, what do you like? And he's like, I like it to be weird, and they're like, all right, let's do that for you. And what about the rest of us? The other 99.9% of the church, like, we have to also be focused on what's appropriate. And if something's alive, it changes. And the only time anything stops changing is when it's dead. And the church is alive, and the tradition is alive. It's a living tradition. And so what we see in the history of the church over and over again, if you read anything, the church changes all the time. It changes with the times, and it changes to react to certain situations. That's what it does.
Changes in what way, though?
A great example, right? So a great question. So, one example that comes to mind is in the early church, for example, if you want to be baptized, they just baptize you. Well, because, in the early church, if you were baptized and you became a Christian, there's a good chance they'd kill you if they found you. It was a persecuted religion. And so anyone who wanted to be baptized were like, all right, knock yourself out. If anybody wanted to be ordained a bishop, most likely you're being ordained a bishop and a martyr. Because as soon as they found the little community, they immediately strike the shepherd, kill the bishops, first thing they do, and the community scatters. Well, then once Christianity became tolerated, Edict of Milan 313 AD, and Constantine allowed, well, then the floodgates opened. Everybody started joining because it was cool, it was popular, the emperor was doing it, it was politically savvy to become a Christian. And then the church said, whoa, we gotta change this. So they invented this thing called catechumens, right? And basically said, like, okay, now you're gonna wait 3 years, we're gonna learn about the church before we baptize you. This is revolutionary at the time. And I'm sure some people were like, wait, I've never seen catechumen. That's not traditional. That's not what we did. That's not what our fathers did. And you're like, well, okay, sure, but they didn't have this situation, and we do now. And so we're gonna adapt to this situation, and we're gonna have an education program for 3 years and before you become baptized.
But isn't that like a thin line, though? Because some changes you could say hypothetically would apply to that, and some of them would be skewed in a direction where they're changing for another agenda, so to say.
Yeah, and this is sort of the difficulty. This is what an ecumenical council does, or even councils of bishops, right? I mean, by nature, the church must move very slowly, right? It's an oil tanker. You don't turn it on a dime, But it isn't even about changing the church. It's about a mindset of being static, right? Versus a mindset of saying, I will follow Christ, and allow that openness to kind of penetrate my heart. Yeah. But, like you said, I think things have to move very, very slowly. But we've already started in that, that phase. First thing we change is language, which, frankly, other churches that came to America didn't do it as nearly as quickly as we did, and suffered greatly. The Russian church suffered greatly because they're like, no, we're holding on to, the Slavonic, Russian liturgical language, and until it devastated their church and left nobody in it.
It's interesting.
But we learned that lesson quickly, and we adapted quicker than some other groups. So, this is the kind of thing that we have to focus on, and the key is education. The key is knowledge. It isn't about how I feel or the key is by going deep. And I think once you're anchored deep in the church, you're anchored deep in the fathers, you're anchored deep in Christ, people tend to see what needs to happen, and they tend to agree because their eyes are on the same bogey. And if we're all looking at the same thing, I think we all kind of get there eventually.
And I guess nowadays, like, I know you teach at USC, at a big college, you tend to see, a lot of distractions, a lot of opinions, a lot of one way or another ideologies. How is it, or in your opinion, a good way to stay focused on ours and to stay in alignment with what we're taught in our church?
Depth, deep, go deep. Go deep into the Gospels, go deep into the person of Christ, go deep into the spiritual life. I heard Abuna Loa in Torrance, God rest his soul, he gave this example, I really loved it. He said, when there's a storm and up on the surface the boats are getting trashed, the fish don't know there's a storm, and the deeper the fish is, what storm, and to a fish, I mean, it's just steady. And he said, and you feel that when you talk to a saint, right? The world can be imploding and things can be happening, and the saints are steady because they have a depth in Christ and they have a vision, and they can just very clearly see what's happening, and they can filter it through the eyes of Christ, and the Holy Spirit guides. So as a young person, I'd say, focus on the depth, right? I mean, if someone says something, is that person a saint? And I don't want to be like fanatical here, but like focus on the saints, because they've stood the test of time. It's kind of like, when you read the classics. Yeah. They're classic for a reason, and don't read about the classics, and don't read what someone's commentary on the classic was. Sometimes, Plato's book is this big and the commentary is this big. Just read Plato, right? And so read the fathers, read these guys directly, and focus on that, and have less noise, because right now the world is noise. Right. Like personally, I've stopped watching television. I've stopped watching the news. I just can't. There's just too much, and I just focus on my reading and my service and my prayer life. And then when things emerge, I can pretty quickly just kind of see it for what it is, right. And you just weigh it versus this ocean that you're in. And I think that's the best approach for a young person. It's just, stop listening to the noise and the rhetoric. Everyone has an agenda, unfortunately, now, and it's about hits and likes and shares, and you don't get hits and likes and shares with, normal human being stuff. Absolutely. You got to be crazy town. That's the only way it works to make money. So. Yeah, especially with social media, it seems like I don't think human beings are built to withstand so many opinions at one time, or so many points of views at one time. Yeah. I think that gets very hard. And I was reading this book about community. Yeah. And I think it's a Catholic guy, and he was talking about how the church community is sort of the perfect size community where I can feel like I can make a difference and I can interact with people. But when my community is too large, internationally, for example, what happens is, as a human being, I'm not used to being every night seeing, 80 people were killed today. 1,000 people were killed today. I can't handle that. I can't process that. And if you bombard me with that, he says, you're going to have one of two things. You're either going to become an angry individual, and you're just going to be mad and like, why is this happening? And why are people so bad? And get angry at the government, and get angry at the group, and get angry at whatever. Or you're going to protect yourself by being apathetic and not care about anything, and being cold, because you can't live in the middle, right? So we're just not built for that kind of community. Our community has to be smaller, right? So that, a church community, there's enough people there, there's enough problems there. I feel like I can make a difference. I feel like I can help. I feel like I know people well enough, and I have a purpose there, and I can actually influence it. Because when I can't control the badness that's out there, then I'm just going to get really frustrated and really angry and bitter and resentful. And man, there's a lot of those people out there, and they're just mad, and everyone just blames the other side, left or right.
Right.
And they're the problem, and they're the reason everything's bad. And then they just get angrier, and they watch something happen, right? And then some nut job posts something about it. That post goes viral, and then they'll see what the left thinks, see what the right think, and here we go, right? And now the only way I can process my own, sadness is being angry at the other side for letting this happen.
Yeah, and it's so much easier to get angry like that. It seems like that's the most, not natural, but that's the quickest response people have to these things.
Yeah.
And it just makes it that much harder to navigate it.
Yeah.
But especially with things going on around the world, like Palestine or the stabbings we had recently, or Charlie Kirk, or whatever the case may be, it's kind of hard for you to detach yourself from all of this stuff going on. So I guess it is important to not watch news and turn off your social media and things like that. And there's something else that actually has been coming up a lot, which is the idea of salvation. Is it possible for somebody to lose their salvation?
So, in Orthodoxy, we don't view salvation or even confession in a judicial way. Like, you made a mistake, and now you either have to pay for it or you have to confess it. We view confession as a physician. We don't view sin as this thing that needs to be paid for. We view sin as a disease. And so we view confession as healing. So our spiritual life isn't about, did I do the sin? Did I confess for it properly? Did I confess enough things such that I get into heaven? Because then it's a very legalistic transaction, right? And then the question, like, can I lose it or not? Well, I don't know. Did you really have it or not? I don't know. How many things can you have going on and still be saved? And now it's this mathematical equation that I got to figure out, right? Versus, St. John Cassian, he wrote The Lives of Many Monks. He wrote this book called The Conferences, and I just love this book. It's so well done. Because he's a Western guy, but he's interviewing Eastern monks, Egyptian monks, Syrian monks in the 4th century. And he writes this book, this chapter, the 9th conference, on the verse, faith, hope, and love. And he talks about this as the levels of spiritual life and paths to perfection. He says faith is sort of this bottom level of, I believe in heaven and hell. And he says, when you're at that level and you're leaving hell, you're like, I just don't want to go to hell. And that, he said, is like that of a slave. A slave works because he doesn't want to get beat. And I only have one thing: don't get beat. Right. Don't get a whipping. So I work, but I'm scared, right? And I'm scared of God. And then he said the next level is hope, which is I'm hoping for a reward. And there he said it's kind of like you're a mercenary or a worker, right? You go work at your Chick-fil-A. And you don't work because the manager is going to beat you, right? You work because I'm going to get a paycheck after 2 weeks, right? And so now I've elevated a little bit. Now I'm like, I just want to go to heaven. I want to get in, and it's better than hell. And even that one, both those levels, you think about them, there's no love of God there. That's just love of me. That's just selfish, right? I don't want to go to hell. That's about me. Right. I want to go to heaven. That's about me, right? Don't tell me you love God yet. You just love you. Right. So, and then he said, but we all have to be working for that final level, right? And it's fine to kind of start at those bottom levels, but you can't stay there. And the analogy, obviously, the first one comes to mind is parenting, right? When you have a little kid, you punish them when they mess up. In Egypt, we hit them with a ship, right? But, there's other ways to punish kids, other than hitting them, apparently. So they say. We punish kids when they're little. And then when they're older, you can't punish a teenager, right? But what you can do is you can say, if you do this, I'll buy you a phone. I'll buy you those shoes. I'll buy, I can incent them, right? I can reward them. If you do your chores, I'll give you an allowance. Right now, there's hope for a reward. That's the next level. But hopefully that kid grows into a place where he loves his parents, right? So, I'm 54, when my parents are sick and I help them out, it's not because I'm afraid they're going to hit me,
Right.
And it's not because they're going to give me any money. It's because I love them, right? And so when I'm doing something out of love, I'm going overboard, right? You can't, those martyrs, what we say in the fraction is the martyrs lived in the caves and these monasteries and in the deserts. And we say in the fraction, out of their great love for Christ the King. You can't make someone live in a desert out of fear.
Right.
That's not going to drive you to that kind of level. So we're not looking for fear. We're not looking for what does it take and what do I got to do. That's my dad, right? And and Christianity is about freedom. It's freedom in Christ, right? So I want to go above and beyond. It's kind of like you have a girlfriend or fiance or wife, right? And you forget her birthday, and she'll be mad. Right? And you'll be like, well, okay, fine. What do you want? What do you want me to do? Okay, you want me to remember your birthday? Fine, I'll remember your birthday. And it's like, no. I want you to want to remember my birthday, right? If I have to tell you, here's the list of things you do. If you do these things, I'll be happy. No, that's not love. Right? I want you to, out of your own heart, like, like there's the sermons by St. Macarius. One of the translations, there's 50 spiritual homilies by St. Macarius. One of the translations called Intoxicated by God. I love that name, right? Intoxicated by God. Like when you read St. Macarius' spiritual homilies, this isn't a guy who's like, did I get it or not? Did I earn it? He's intoxicated, and so he loves recklessly. And that's really where we want to be at, The Mother Teresas of the world and these saints, the St. Georges, they loved recklessly,
Where does that switch happen, do you think? Because I feel like for the majority of us, we do start in that fear stage. I don't know if I'm obeying God because I fear him or because I love him. And I don't really know or how to put into words when that switch happens or when that changes. In your opinion, when does that change?
I mean, I think God touches all of us differently.
Yeah.
And I think the switch happens when I feel God's love. When I get how much he loves me. And then you're touched. It's like the story of the Samaritan woman, right? As soon as she got it, as soon as she touched him, it all changed, right? And that's what we find, and you'll people like, they lived, whatever, they lived a really bad life, did all the things, and then all of a sudden something just switched. And it's usually that touch of God's love. And God reaches all of us very differently, and it's very personal, and you can't even really share it because it doesn't really make sense to other people, and it's hard. Sometimes, someone will be saying something, like, I know this sounds really crazy, but, this is why. And I absolutely know that was for me, and I'm like, I absolutely believe that, because that's how God touches us. It's so personal and it's so unique and so individual and so quiet. It's quiet, when he touches us. And then once that spark happens, it's not the end of the road. It's just the beginning, right? And now you're on a track of fire, And Saint Maria of Paris has this wonderful quote I always say is, Christianity is either fire or it is nothing. There's no middle, And this is what it says in the Book of Revelation too, right? You're neither hot nor cold. You're lukewarm, so I spit you out of my mouth. So once that, and no coincidence that the Holy Spirit appeared as fire, tongues of fire. Once that fire touches us, it consumes you.
What about people that haven't had that experience just yet? Like people that maybe are just on the outskirts of Christianity and they haven't experienced God loves fully. How do you try to even begin to explain that to somebody that hasn't experienced it?
I mean, every person, you have to, you kind of meet them where they're at and figure out what their life's about, what their story is. But for most people, the touch of God's love comes from another person. St. Augustine says you're the hands of God, the people. We're the eyes, we're the mouth of God. We're St. Athanasius says, we're the moon that reflects the sun. So that's your job. Our job as Christians is to be the moon, just be the best moon you can be and reflect God. Not because I'm trying to reflect him and like, hey, I want people to see how good God is, so I'm going to be really good, and I'm going to pretend like I'm joyful, and I'm going to pretend like I'm peaceful, and then they're going to say, look at you, you're a Christian, and hey, and then they're going to ask me about it, and then that's my ego.
Right.
That's me wanting to play a part so that I, can convert people, right? It's not what it's about at all, right? I think regardless of you even trying, you're going to reflect, and people are going to see in you something, right? And they're going to see God.
Yeah.
And that changes more people than anything else, there's a story about St. Pachomius of how he was converted when he came into contact with a bunch of Christians. He was a pagan soldier in the Roman army. And he came into contact with these Christians who they were sent to kill. And the Christians responded with extreme love, and made these soldiers a feast. The soldiers coming to kill them. And, St. Pachomius is like, if I survive this thing, I'm going to become one of these people. Like, this is it. This is the real deal. And you see it. So I think as Christians, we need to talk a lot less. Way too much talk. Way too much, truth. We got to speak the truth. I'm speaking truth. And that just, gives you a license to be mean, and harsh and judgmental. Stop speaking and do what St. John Chrysostom says and said, less words, more actions, more deeds. We should be the sermons. This is St. John Chrysostom. These are the fathers. This is the way they thought. Cut the talking. Say Abuna B'Shoy Kemen, says people have heard enough about Christ. They need to see him now. Enough talk.
That's such a good point. And with Christianity comes hand in hand a lot of suffering. In one way or another. A lot of things that I've been struggling with, and I know people have been asking me somewhat along the same topic, is how to make sense of your suffering or make meaning in your suffering. So that's something that I would like to get your opinion on a little bit.
I mean, the problem of pain, right? This is, C.S. Lewis's book is it's a problem, right? And it's always been, why does a good God do bad things, and why does God allow suffering, and why? And of course, there's a million, answers. But what I'd like to focus on personally is I ask a lot fewer questions about why, because the why questions really don't get you anywhere. Why did God do this? I don't know. You don't know. Buna doesn't know. Bishop doesn't know. Nobody knows. Right. That's God. That's infinity. And in fact, if I can distill it down, if I can tell you exactly why God did something, then he's not God.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, once something finite can explain infinity, then it's not infinity. Right? So, the why question doesn't help. And then we try to figure it out. Does God want me to do this? Does God want me to do that? And then, you're walking and then a leaf falls and you're like, okay, well, that's a sign. And that's how you lose your mind, right?
Right.
So a lot less why, because then you can really quickly go into victim because there's no explanation and then someone gives you an answer that's lame and you're like, that's a lame answer.
Right.
Okay, so that's not it. What I focus on is the what. Okay, what can I do? I'm not gonna try to figure out why this happened or why this person did this thing or why God allowed this, or what can I do in this moment, given the situation, and what's my best response? And what part of the gospel should I be living right now? And what's my best action? What would Jesus do, right? And that's it. And I just stay very focused there, versus trying to dissect the thing and understand it. And, God, explain yourself to me. No, I'm not going to, and I don't need to. Right? So for me, that's my approach with suffering. But that's because, I'm in a place where I trust. A lot of people aren't at that place. And so they see suffering and they're like, this is ridiculous, right? Why? And, here you go back and you say, suffering wasn't even withheld from Christ. And it wasn't even withheld from St. Mary, his mom. You think about this, right? Now you're pregnant. Everyone's talking about you. He didn't withhold, he didn't prevent the shame of gossip about his mom. And then now they're trying to kill you.
Right.
You have to flee in the middle of the night. You didn't get an itinerary. You didn't get this is where we're staying. Joseph forgot to make a reservation, right? You gotta flee. Pregnant. Like, and how much uncertainty is in that? How much risk is in that? Like, how much is like, I mean, can you imagine being like, am I the mother of God or what? Like, and this is my treatment?
Right.
Right? I mean, and he didn't prevent her from going through that. Can you imagine what went through her head? Like, what is this? What is happening?
Right.
Why is this happening? You know, but I don't think she went to the why. She went right to the, okay, this is my child, and how can I protect him? And what's the best thing a mom can do at this moment? So God doesn't prevent suffering from anyone, right? Including his son, including his mom, including Joseph. I mean, no one.
Right.
So this is sort of the path, right? I mean, Christ said, in the world there will be tribulation. End of story. That's it.
That's what it is.
It just is, right? From the very beginning. It's a broken world. It's a fallen world. It's a corrupted world, right? And people do bad things to each other all the time.
Yeah.
And so my question isn't like, why are the bad people doing the bad things? And they just will. You know, is there injustice in the world? There is. Will it continue? It will. Are you going to change it? No. Are you going to change the world? No. Can you change you? That's even really hard to do. You know, I mean, I remember, you know, when we had all, you know, when Black Lives Matter was, you know, and everybody was upset. And I started talking, you know, to some of the youth about injustice. And I'm like, it's just in the world. It just sucks, right? The best thing you can do, your best course of action, you know, and I asked, how many of you have been unjust to somebody? And everyone raised their hand. And I said, okay, no, stop doing that, right? You want to end injustice? Stop doing that. You with the hand up. And everyone's like, well, you know, you don't know what she did, right? You know, I mean, she deserved it, right? And nobody wants to end their injustice.
Everybody rationalizes it.
They want to end someone else's injustice, right? You're being unjust. Those people are unjust.
Right.
And I'm really good at telling you all about how the other people should be just. So, you know, start with you, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what all the fathers say. You know, Saint Seraphim of Sarov says, you know, acquire the Holy Spirit and 1,000 around you will be saved. You know, so that this is our calling in Orthodoxy. It's a very micro perspective. You just be the best you can be. You get close to your dad and then let him work through you. You know, without worrying so much about, well, why'd you do this? And why'd you do that? And why are they doing this? And look at that person and look how unjust, you know. What the devil does is he divides us against ourselves. I mean, and that was the first strike, right? You know, the Tower of Babel, he divided people against each other through language. And ever since then, that's Satan's strike. Divide us as humans, right? We're no longer the body of Christ. We're divided. And it goes down even down to husband and wife. Divide them through confusion. You know, and anybody who's got a girlfriend or boyfriend or husband, wife, know men and women don't talk the same language, right? Why is that? I don't know. I got to ask God when I get up there. But it's confusion, right? And the guy's saying this, and the girl's hearing that. That's what Satan does, right? And if he can divide us, he wins.
Another thing I just wanted to pick your brain on a little bit is there's been like a huge spike in like depression, anxiety, things along those lines. Do you think the answer is just, like you said, finding Christ in a deeper way?
I mean, you know, the spike is crazy,
right? And
unexplained and unexplainable by most measures. So, you know, the things you got to look at are what has changed in the last 50 years, 20 years, really, that's caused this. And you know, the first thing obviously comes to mind is social media and, you know, the phone. So, and every research paper that's come out is all pointing in the same direction. That's the culprit. That's a disaster. That's the worst thing that's ever happened to mankind, you know, ever.
Right.
So, you know, I have to believe that's got something to do with it. But it isn't so much the phone is bad, as much as it is the phone replaces what I really need. right? Because all of us have this, I like to call it this infinite hole in our heart. And it's a God-shaped hole, and it only gets filled with God. And I will spend my whole life filling it with anything but, right? I'll fill it with alcohol, I'll fill it with drugs, I'll fill it with guys, I'll fill it with girls, I'll fill it with power, I'll fill it with degrees, I'll fill it with prestige, I'll fill it with my house, I'll fill it with a boat, I'll fill it with a watch, I'll fill it with a purse. I'll try to put material things that'll make me happy. And then, of course, the punchline is nothing makes you happy, right? Nothing material, nothing finite can fill an infinite hole. And so to me, social media is just another thingy in that long list of things that we all try. And you watch people doom scroll, and they're sad as they're doing it, right? And it's just like this, it's like watching someone eat there's a huge bag of potato chips, which I have done, right? And you're eating this potato and you just hate yourself. You're not happy. And you're going, why am I doing this? I'm still doing this. Right. I haven't stopped. I keep, and you're not stopping. Look. And you're trying to fill this emptiness with this, and I've done this with ice cream, and as I'm taking the ice cream, I'm like, why? So I feel like that with the doom scrollers, you're just watching them, they're sad, and they just keep going, and they think the next swipe is gonna be the one that makes them happy, but the next swipe is just as lame as the one before it.
So it just keeps getting worse.
Yeah. So I think it's just the only problem with the phone is it's not God.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just the 10 millionth item on the Satan's list of replace God with X.
It's distractions.
It's a distraction, right? And that's really the problem with sin. The problem with sin isn't the sin. I can come back from sin. That's easy, right? The problem is the hopelessness, right? The I'm going to leave God. Right? I mean, you go back to the story of Adam and Eve, right? What did Adam do after he sinned? Sin's no problem. It's I hid from God.
Right.
And that's what we do. The problem is the hiding, right? And so I don't want to be with God. I don't want to be talking to God. I don't want to be around God. I don't want to even think about him. That's what sin does to me. It drives me away from my dad.
Right.
Sin I can fix in a second. Right? It's that you don't want to talk to me now, right? And in extreme situations, it replaces dad,
right?
Or so you think for a while, right? And you go down the rabbit hole of, whatever it is, alcohol, porn, girl, guy, drug, whatever, name your thing. And, 6 months later, 6 years later, you come out of it and you're like, yeah, gee, that was a bad idea. That didn't work out so well.
But it comes back from that feeling of like not feeling worthy anymore, right? From continuing to sin, do the wrong thing, that you feel that, oh, well, God doesn't love me anymore. Yeah. And that's a really easy thing to fall into, especially when you don't have enough knowledge about how God's personality or character is, right?
Yeah. I mean, and this is where the fathers are really handy here, like the way they present God's unconditional love and the way they talk about how God loves us. And, and the saints say, if you were the only human on earth, Jesus would have come down and died for you,
right.
So that's the beauty of when you read the fathers, you get that love. And then it inspires you. And really, a lot of it is I just don't love myself.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much God loves me. And I don't understand. And it's really hard to understand.
Absolutely.
Because we live in a world of conditional love, conditional friendship, conditional relationships. I'm a friend as long as you're a friend.
Right.
And as soon as it doesn't go well, it doesn't, we're done.
Yeah.
Or you act in a certain way I don't like, we're done. And so we all live in this world. And to live in a world where someone unconditionally loves me,
it's hard to comprehend.
It's very hard to, but once you comprehend that, you're just like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like, when Christ covered that sinful woman, and he covered the sinful woman. Like, you think of that story, he saves her life, and he doesn't shame her, and he makes the people throwing the stones walk away. And then he's really nice to her, and he says, I don't judge you either. At that point, she's looking up at him going, I would do anything for this guy. I would do anything for this guy. And the order of this story is important because after he did all those things, and he built that relationship that he built very quickly, where she's looking at him like, I would die for this man. So now she's a Christian. And then he says, go and sin no more.
Right.
right? And sometimes we reverse that order, right? We meet someone we don't know. Hey, what's your name again? By the way, I don't care. Go and sin no more.
Right.
You know, I'm speaking truth, bro. You know, let me drop some verses on you. And you're like, you don't even know me. You don't know anything about me. And so we love to jump to the end of that story without doing all the work, you know, which Jesus did in an hour or two, would take us, you know, maybe a year or two.
Yeah.
And put in the work, right? Build that relationship first. And so I think also that it comes back to that earlier point we made, which is how do I feel God's love? I'm going to feel it through someone who's going to build that relationship with me, unconditionally love me, you know, and know that, you know, no matter what I tell this person and this one person, they're still going to love me, right? And I'm going to know who God is because of this person.
Yeah.
And I don't need 5 of these people in my life. I just need one, you know? So, you know, in the church, we can all think of that one guy or one woman, right? Who that teta could do, that just all pure love, right? And that's the bogey. That's the target of all our life. We should be that teta, you know, that's all we want to be. And I don't need 5 of those people in my life. I just need one, and I feel it, you know, and we can all think of that one Sunday school teacher or that one servant, or that one person, right? Who is just love. And that's where you touch God.
Yeah. So the best approach, in your opinion, would be be a reflection of God, more than trying to hammer away the point.
Oh yeah, you can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Be it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Be it. And it's not that easy, but once you've experienced it, I mean, you'd be a real jerk to not forgive someone after you've been forgiven. I mean, Abunam Shoy Kamel, you know, the saint Abunam Shoy Kamel used to say, anyone who judges, it's the diagnosis is easy. They don't see their own sin. I mean, you can't judge someone if you see your own sin. It's impossible.
So true, yeah.
Right? So anytime you hear anyone judging, I know one thing about you. You don't see your own sin. That's it. Yeah. And so, because it's impossible to go and, you know, and Jesus gave this exact example, right? There's someone who was forgiven 500, and then his slave refused to forgive 50.
Right.
And he's like saying that this is what you do, bro. I'm God. I forgave you all of this, and your brother just does his little thing, and you're like, no. Which means you didn't feel my 500.
Right.
If you felt the 500, nobody's gonna say, well, I'm not forgiving 50. You'd be a real jerk to do that.
Right.
You know. So I think that's really what it comes down to. How do people feel God's love in me? If I've felt God's forgiveness and I felt God's love, it's really hard for me to like judge and condemn and attack, and I'm going to reflect that in the way I treat people, and they're going to feel it. And believe me, they're going to be more inspired to be Christ-like and to be good than any amount of shaming or attacking or guilting will ever produce, right? Because we go back to our faith, hope, love, right? In the faith, hope area, sphere, or, you know, you can go to heaven, you know, you're only going to get so much out of me. No one goes and dies. You know, there's no St. Georges that come out of faith and hope, you know, or fear and hope for a reward. St. George wasn't like, yeah, man, I can't wait to get to, you know, like, you don't die like that, you know, for that. That's love. Yeah. And that's where the greatness comes from.
And this other idea kind of ties back a little bit into it, is this idea of feeling hypocritical with helping people with something you're struggling with yourself. So you might not have overcame that yourself, but you're still in a position where you're able to help this person with that same type of sin. How do you get away from feeling that sense of hypocrisy?
Get over yourself.
Is that what it is?
Welcome to the club. I mean, if I didn't get to talk about, if I didn't get to give talks or help people with the sins I'm still struggling with, I wouldn't be giving talks. Like, I mean, what topic can I talk about? I can't think of any.
That's such a good point, though.
I mean, get over yourself, right? I mean, and it's worse than that, right? Because if you only feel like you can talk when I'm good,
right?
Well, then heaven help you the day you give a talk.
It's never going to happen.
It's not never going to happen. The day it happens, I'd be like, uh-oh, what's going on with you?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like saying, you know, I only go to communion when I'm worthy. Slow down. What'd you just say?
Right.
Right. So now you show up to communion. Do you feel worthy? Like, that's never the case, you know? Or, you know, someone refuses the call to priesthood, says, I'm not worthy. All right, well, the day, you know, if you tell someone I'm not worthy, that's why I'm not a priest, and then you call the bishop and say, okay, I'm ready now. It's like, oh, do you feel worthy? Is that what's going on? Well, now you're really not worthy, you know? And so you don't ever want to be in the boat where my worth is what allows me to be a servant.
Right.
You should always feel that you are not worthy to be a servant. And when, you know, as Christ said, when I have done everything good, you know, I am an unworthy servant.
Wow, that's such a great perspective.
You're never in the spot.
Yeah. I guess last thing I kind of wanted to pick your brain on a little bit is this idea of constantly removing God from schools and making it. Well, I guess there's two sides. There's sides that do want to include God in schools, like I've seen like in other states and stuff, they want to include it more. And some people think that that's a bad idea. What is your kind of opinion on that?
That's politics. I don't care. We find God in the homes. Kids learn about God from their parents.
I love that answer.
And if their parents forgive, they know God forgives. And if their parents listen to them, they know God listens to them. And if their parents are merciful to them, they know God is merciful. So I will learn about God from my parents, not from a school. I mean, I know people going to Catholic schools or Protestant schools, and they're as messed up as everybody else.
So true.
You know, all the bad is in all the schools. So it doesn't matter. I mean, on a personal level, not that it matters. All three of my kids went to public school. I mean, whatever, right? And for us, it was like, yeah, let's just expose them to the world. Like, you know, there's obviously some wisdom, but they're gonna learn about who God is from us, right? And the influence parents have on their kids is way larger than the influence school's gonna have.
Right.
So, you know, Christians are, you know, and we see this in the Cynic Tsar all the time, right? You know, and it's kind of a corny story. You know, he was raised of very righteous parents, and they taught him on the books of the church, blah blah blah, right? There's a lot of truth to that,
right.
You know. That's probably why he's a saint, you know, and not because his parents, you know, forced him to go to hymn class and forced him to go to Sunday school and forced him to go to. That's not what the righteous. They were just righteous.
Yeah.
They were just good people. They helped poor people, and they stood up for others, and they didn't judge in their homes, and they were kind. And when people were talking about issues, they took both sides, and they were balanced and loving and compassionate, and they tried to see someone's perspective as to why they could have done such a thing and offer them an excuse in front of their kids. The kids learned what God does, who God is. You know, not like, oh, these, you know, the bad non-Christians are hurting the Christians, and if America, we need to win this war of morality. And, you know, in my opinion, you know, passing a law doesn't make anybody moral.
Absolutely.
You're just following the law. I just don't want to go to jail. It doesn't make me a Christian.
That's so true.
And you're just legislating my behavior. Okay, you can legislate my behavior. You can't legislate my heart. You know, and the law can only do so much, right? I mean, you know, it's legal to hate your brother. It's legal. You just can't, you know, there can't be any assault or battery. But hating, that's fine. You know, judging, that's fine. Divorcing, that's fine. You know, like, I mean, the law isn't morality.
Right. And I think we mistake that sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's like when the law passed and we can all smoke weed. And, you know, it's like, oh, shoot, now we lost. It's like, no, we didn't.
Right.
You know, we could all get drunk last week anyway, right? Doesn't make it right. We can all go to Vegas and gamble. Doesn't make it right. You know, you can go to Vegas and get a prostitute. Doesn't make it right. Just because it's legal,
right,
doesn't make it right. You know, I mean, in Egypt, I can marry 4 women. Doesn't make it right. Like, it's legal. Okay, whatever. You know, so my law as a Christian is above the law of the country. I can be in whatever country. I can go to a country where killing is legal. Okay, doesn't make it right.
Right.
You know, so, you know, for me, the impetus we got to change the laws and make it, the laws are way down here, man. Christian law is about the heart. about dying to the self. You know, the real Christianity is when your wife wants you to do something and you don't want to do it. And you dig deep. That's the real deal, right? That's where the rubber hits the road. And you show her love when you don't want to.
Right.
And she shows you respect when she doesn't want to. That's the real deal. You can't pass a law to make that happen. And that's, you know, that's what Christ said, right? You know, deny yourself, carry your cross, and follow me. That's the gospel. That's what real Christians do. You can't make me do that. Right. And if you made me do it, then it's not coming from my heart. That's what St. John Chrysostom says.
That was beautifully said.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Archie Mark, for sitting down and doing this with me. I would love to do another one with you sometime soon if I can catch you and you're not too busy. I really
appreciate you, man.
It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Yeah.